that gnawing emptiness you feel. It has nothing to do with being single. It's the silent scream of a soul you abandoned years ago. What if that loneliness haunting you isn't a void, but the ghostly echo of the woman you were before you learned to silence yourself to please everyone else? Society sold you a devastating lie, its most profitable business, that you are broken, incomplete, and in desperate need of someone else to be whole. But what if that was the ultimate trap? What if the very thing you've been taught to fear, your solitude, is actually the one key that unlocks your absolute liberation? The great Carl Jung uncovered a forbidden truth. Most people don't love, they cling, using others as a human shield against the terror of their own existence. And women have been trained to master this art of self-erasure, becoming experts in reading everyone's needs, while our own souls wither in neglect. You were told true love means sacrifice, but no one warned you the sacrifice was yourself. You called it maturity, you called it love, but it was the beginning of your own disappearance. If this is already hitting a nerve deep inside you, I need you to do one thing for me right now. A shocking number of people who feel a powerful connection to these messages watch every day but aren't subscribed. If you're one of them, click that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because what I am about to reveal in this video is a truth you cannot afford to miss. And while you're at it, press the like button to signal to yourself and the universe that you are ready to reclaim your power. Then, go down to the comments and tell me, what part of the world are you watching from? I want to see just how far these life-changing teachings of Carl Jung can travel to help souls like yours. Are you ready to stop being a ghost in your own life? To finally meet the powerful woman you were before the world told you who to be? Then stay right where you are, because we are about to begin your resurrection. Jung knew that certain paths demand silence, solitude, and sacrifice, but not the sacrifice of the self, but of fear. The fear of being seen as selfish for choosing yourself. The fear of being judged for preferring the intensity of your own company to the lukewarmness of a convenient relationship. The fear of discovering that maybe, just maybe, you are enough for yourself. And now, as you listen to these words, something inside you is stirring. Because deep down, you know. There's a version of you that you've been waiting to meet. A version that doesn't need external validation to breathe. That doesn't negotiate its essence for company. That can be alone without collapsing. Do you dare to meet her? Because that's what this is all about. Recovering the woman you were before you learned to disappear. Discovering who you are when no one is watching. When you don't have to explain your steps or soften your edges. Stay with me, because what comes next will change your relationship with yourself forever. Society has a very specific plan for your life. They programmed you from a young age with an invisible script. Study, work, find someone, get married, have children, grow old with company. It sounds beautiful. It sounds safe. It sounds like the path every woman should follow. But no one asked you if that was really your path, or just the only one they allowed you to imagine. Jung understood that following others' scripts is a silent form of self-destruction. It's living someone else's life while your own soul withers, waiting for its turn. And we women, trained to be complacent, have turned this sacrifice into a virtue. We have been taught that being for others is our highest purpose, that finding our identity in relation to someone else is love. But what happens when you wake up one morning and you no longer know who you are? What happens when you realize you've lived so many years being the girlfriend of, the wife of, the mother of, that you lost sight of the woman beneath all those roles? It's terrifying, because it means you've been living as a shadow of yourself, as a version edited for external consumption. Romantic love, as it has been sold to us, is actually an emotional prison decorated with flowers and promises. They taught you that to love is to merge, to lose yourself in the other, to build an identity based on emotional dependence. They told you that if you really love, you must be willing to change, to adapt, to become less than you are so that the other feels comfortable. Jung saw this as a form of psychological violence, the violence of asking someone to betray themselves in the name of love, the violence of creating women who don't know how to exist without the validation of a male gaze, The violence of convincing you that your loneliness is a problem that needs to be solved instead of a sacred space that needs to be inhabited. Have you noticed how when you're single, everyone assumes you're looking, as if your natural state were one of lack, as if your completeness depended on being chosen by someone, as if being at peace with oneself were an anomaly that needs explanation? But what if it were exactly the opposite? What if the women who choose solitude weren't lost but found? The truth is that the world does not forgive women who learn to be self-sufficient. It does not forgive those who discover they can be happy without negotiating every aspect of their existence. It does not forgive those who realize that loneliness is not a lack, but a strength. Because a woman who doesn't need to be rescued is a dangerous woman. She is a free woman. And freedom, especially in women, has always been seen as a threat to the established order. Let me tell you something that Jung discovered, and that revolutionized his understanding of love. Most people who claim to be in love are actually running from themselves. They use romance as an anesthetic against the terror of facing their own soul, naked, raw, without distractions. And women, raised to be emotional saviors, have perfected this form of escape. They taught you that your value resided in your capacity to love others, to care, to support, to be someone else's emotional refuge. But no one taught you to be your own refuge. No one told you that the most important relationship of your life is the one you have with yourself. No one explained that before you can truly love someone, you need to learn not to abandon yourself. How many times have you silenced your intuition because it contradicted what your partner needed to hear? How many times have you betrayed your own truth to keep the peace? How many times have you felt that pang in your chest screaming, "This is not right," but you ignored it because you were afraid of being alone? The loneliness you fear so much is not the problem. The problem is that you never learned to be with yourself. You confuse solitude with abandonment because for years you abandoned yourself in the name of love. You stopped listening to your inner voice. You stopped honoring your needs. You stopped protecting your boundaries. You became a stranger to yourself. Jung understood that individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, requires periods of sacred solitude, not the bitter loneliness of rejection, but the conscious solitude of choice. The solitude that allows you to hear the whispers of your soul without the noise of others' expectations. The solitude that brings you back to yourself. Because when you are truly alone, without distractions, without anyone to impress or care for, something extraordinary happens. You begin to remember who you were before you learned to disappear. You begin to recognize your own voice beneath all the voices that told you how you should be. You begin to trust your own company more than external validation. It is there, in that space of conscious solitude, where true feminine strength is born. Not the strength that comes from resisting and enduring, but the strength that comes from choosing and respecting oneself. The strength that comes from knowing you can be alone without collapsing, that you can make decisions without consulting, that you can exist without explanations. A woman who has learned to be alone doesn't seek to be completed by others. She seeks to share herself from her completeness. She doesn't seek to be rescued. She seeks to be seen and valued for who she really is. She is not looking for her other half. She is looking for someone who has their own whole orange. That woman is dangerous to a system built on female emotional dependence. That's why they convinced you that loneliness was your enemy, when in reality it is your greatest ally on the path back to yourself. Do you know the difference between a woman who chooses to be alone and a woman who stays in a relationship out of fear? The first has learned to trust herself. The second has learned to betray herself. Jung called this the difference between individuation and adaptation, between becoming who you are and becoming who others need you to be. Constant adaptation is violent. It is a silent form of aggression towards your own essence. Every time you change an opinion to avoid conflict, every time you silence a desire, every time you make yourself small so that another can feel big, you are committing a form of emotional suicide. And the most tragic part is that you call it love. But true love never asks you to disappear. True love doesn't negotiate your essence. It doesn't ask you to dim your light so as not to outshine another. It doesn't demand that you hide your pain to keep the peace. True love sees you, respects you, celebrates you just as you are. And if you've never experienced that, maybe it's time to give it to yourself first. Being alone teaches you something that no relationship can teach you: your own intrinsic worth, not the value you have for others, not your usefulness as a partner, caregiver, or emotional savior, but your value for the simple fact of existing, your value as a complete and independent human being who does not need to be chosen to have worth. Jung said that only when you stop looking outside for what you need to find inside can you truly begin to live. And for women, this means dismantling decades of conditioning that taught us our value depended on being desired, needed, chosen by someone else. Have you ever wondered why you panic when you imagine growing old alone? It's not because loneliness is terrible. It's because you were programmed to believe that a woman without a partner is a woman who has failed. But what if it were the exact opposite? What if a woman who chooses her own company over mediocre relationships was actually the most successful of all? Success is not measured by the number of people willing to stay with you. It's measured by your ability to stay with yourself. It's measured by your ability to create a life so full, so rich, so authentic, that you don't need anyone else to validate it. It's measured by your courage to choose quality over quantity, depth over superficiality, truth over comfort. When a woman learns to be alone without collapsing, when she learns to enjoy her own company, when she builds a life that doesn't need anyone else's approval to exist, she becomes something the world doesn't know how to categorize: a free woman. And a free woman is the most beautiful and terrifying thing that exists, because she can no longer be controlled, manipulated, or convinced to accept less than she deserves. Misunderstood motherhood taught you to be a mother to everyone but yourself. They taught you that caring for others was your nature, your purpose, your greatest virtue. But they never explained that before you can truly care for someone, you need to learn not to abandon yourself. Jung understood that misdirected maternal instinct can become a form of self-destruction disguised as love. How many times have you put others' needs before your own? How many times have you silenced your fatigue because someone else needed your energy? How many times have you swallowed your pain because you didn't want to be a burden? This form of love is toxic not only for you, but for those you love, because you teach them that your needs don't matter, that your well-being is negotiable. Being alone forces you to face an uncomfortable truth. For years, you have been a stranger to yourself. You have been so busy reading others' emotions, anticipating their needs, managing their moods, that you lost contact with your own inner world. You became an expert at giving what you never learned to receive, not even from yourself. Conscious solitude is different from isolation. It's not running away from the world, it's returning to your center. It's creating a sacred space where you can hear your own voice without interference, where you can feel your own emotions without having to manage them to make others feel comfortable, where you can be completely honest with yourself without fear of judgment. Jung knew this process is painful. It's like waking up from a dream and realizing you've been living someone else's life, recognizing all the times you betrayed yourself, all the times you said yes when you wanted to say no, all the times you made yourself small so others could feel big. It's a grieving process, grieving for the woman you thought you had to be. But in that grief, something extraordinary is born. The woman you really are. Not the edited version for external consumption. Not the version that learned to please and disappear, but the authentic, raw, real version. The version that has her own opinions, that knows what she wants, that is not afraid to say no, that doesn't trade her inner peace for external approval. This woman terrifies those who benefited from your constant emotional availability. She terrifies those who were used to you being predictable, malleable, always willing to yield. Because a woman who chooses herself cannot be taken for granted. A woman who knows her own worth does not accept emotional crumbs. A woman who has learned to be alone is not afraid to be alone again. And that is your true strength. Not depending on anyone else to be who you are. Not needing external validation to know you are worthy. Not fearing judgment because you have learned to trust your own criteria. The world is full of women who stayed in relationships because they were more afraid of loneliness than of self-abandonment. Women who chose toxic company over solitary peace. Women who preferred to be half of something dysfunctional rather than be whole by themselves. Jung called this living in the shadow of others instead of shining with your own light. Do you recognize yourself in any of these women? Have you ever been that woman who smiles while something inside her is slowly dying? That woman who says, "I'm fine," when she's falling apart inside. That woman who has learned to be so functional in her dysfunction that she doesn't even recognize the price she's paying. The truth is that staying in a relationship out of fear is not love. It's survival. It's choosing the known over the authentic. False emotional security over real growth. It's living in a comfort zone that is actually a zone of slow death, where every day you betray the woman you could be a little more. Jung understood that certain transformation processes require rupture. You cannot become a new version of yourself while still feeding the old version. You cannot discover who you really are while continuing to be who others need you to be. Sometimes, choosing yourself requires the courage to disappoint those who expected you to keep disappearing. Being alone gives you back something you lost without realizing it: your own authority. The authority to decide how you want to live, what you want to feel, what you want to spend your emotional energy on. The authority to say no without explanation. To choose your own company over convenient company. To create a life that doesn't need anyone else's approval to be valid. That authority terrifies those who benefited from your constant emotional availability. That's why, when a woman starts to choose herself, she often hears, "You've changed. You've become selfish. You're not the same anymore." And they are right. You are not the same. You are no longer the woman who betrayed herself for love, who made herself small for peace, who silenced her truth for harmony. You have become something more dangerous. A woman who knows herself. A woman who has learned that being alone is not a punishment, but a privilege. A woman who has discovered that her own company is more valuable than any relationship based on fear, convenience, or habit. And from that place of integrity, from that deep connection with yourself, everything changes. You no longer attract what you need to fill voids. You attract what resonates with your fullness. You no longer look for someone to complete you. You look for someone who celebrates your completeness. You no longer fear being alone because you have learned that with yourself, you are never truly alone. There is something that Jung understood deeply and that most people avoid facing. Real growth is a solitary process. It cannot be delegated. It cannot be shared. It cannot be done as a couple. It is an internal journey that requires silence, introspection, and a brutal honesty with yourself that very few people are willing to experience. Relationships, no matter how loving, generate noise, emotional interference, too many opinions, too many expectations, too much need to explain every step you take. All that emotional density is a constant invitation to moderation, to soften your edges, to self-edit. But radical thought, authentic growth, does not arise in places where you need to ask for permission to exist. Have you noticed how some of your deepest ideas come when you are completely alone? How your most important insights arise in the quiet when no one is watching you, when you don't need to modulate your intensity to make others feel comfortable? That's not a coincidence. It's that the mind needs space to be dangerous, to explore territories that would be censored if expressed out loud. Einstein did not formulate his theories around family dinner tables. Virginia Woolf did not write her masterpieces while managing couple conflicts. Frida Kahlo did not paint her deepest pain by consulting with others if it was appropriate. These women and men knew something that the culture of romantic love has made us forget, that certain creations require a protected psychic womb, an environment without noise, without emotional interference. True creativity is transgressive, unpredictable, often inappropriate, and that activity rarely fits into ordinary relationships. Imagine interrupting a deep line of thought just to resolve a domestic misunderstanding, soothe an insecurity, or explain why you didn't answer a message. It seems minor, but it's corrosive. The mind loses its thread, the thought dissipates, and the idea that was about to be born dies. Few people notice how many times that cycle is repeated in well-intentioned marriages, courtships, and relationships. Jung would call it a slow poison, the constant dilution of the creative will. And the most tragic part is that it feels normal. Most accept that intellectual mediocrity as the price of love, as part of the high deal. But the solitary creator does not accept it. She chooses something different. She chooses to wake up when she wants, to think until her mind burns, to write without a clock, to destroy what she created the day before and start again, all without having to justify her process to anyone. The absence of ties in this context is fertility, space, a fire that never dies because no one demands it be moderate. Of course, it has a cost. There will be no one waiting for you in the living room. There will be no romantic dinners or Sunday plans. You will be seen as strange, eccentric, cold. But in return, you gain something that no one can give you, the freedom to think as far as your soul can reach. There comes a time in every woman's life when she must decide whose life it really is, not in theory, but in practice. Because most claim to be free, but live as employees of others' expectations. They say they choose for themselves, but every step is filtered by the fear of judgment, rejection, loneliness. Choosing yourself is more than an act of courage. It is an act of war, a silent declaration that you will no longer negotiate your integrity for company. Jung knew that this choice comes with a price, because the moment you decide to make yourself the center of your existence, everything that orbited out of convenience begins to destabilize. People walk away, plans collapse, relationships break. But what remains is you, naked, free, and finally complete. Most do not want that kind of freedom. They want the edited version, freedom with a manual, with guaranteed affection, with a comforting soundtrack. But real freedom is brutal, empty, dangerous. It doesn't come with applause, it comes with silence, and with total responsibility for every choice. True sovereignty is not ruling over others. It is not being ruled by anyone, not by culture, not by lack, not by fear. You know you are on that path when you stop asking if people agree with your decisions, when you start living without asking for permission, when you say no and feel no guilt, when you choose to walk alone, even though everyone says you are wrong. That choice is terrifying and isolating, but it also liberates because you begin to realize something no one told you. The life you really want doesn't fit into the molds they offered you. And to live it, you will have to betray expectations, disappoint, and let down those who projected a version of you that never existed. This is where many give up. They return to lukewarm relationships, predictable jobs, plans that don't upset anyone. They call it peace, but deep down they know it's surrender. Jung would say, become who you are, but no one teaches you how, because being who you really are means letting go of the security of being who others approve of. It means putting yourself at the center of your life without fear of being called selfish. Selfishness is not thinking of yourself. Selfishness is demanding that others think for you. The person who chooses herself stops delegating. She no longer blames others for her unhappiness. She doesn't wait to be saved. She doesn't need to be understood to move forward. She is enough for herself. And that scares people, because whoever is enough for herself does not bend. She doesn't need to please to belong. She doesn't need to agree to keep affection. She doesn't need to hide her intensity to fit in. That person is dangerous because she is free. And in a world built on emotional dependencies, a free person is a threat. You've made it this far, and that means something. It means that on some level, you already knew that the life they sold you with rings, promises, and emotional stability is not for you. Maybe you tried it. Maybe you're still trying. But something inside remains restless. It keeps whispering that there is something more. And there is. But that more is not in finding someone. It's in becoming someone. Someone who doesn't need approval to breathe. Someone who can be alone without collapsing. Someone who builds an existence not to be accepted, but to be true. Jung said that he who has a why can bear almost any how, but you only find that why when you silence the world around you. And that requires courage, detachment, losing the comforts that kept your soul asleep. The world is not interested in your freedom. It is interested in your adaptation. But there comes a point where adapting is equal to dying, just in slow motion. And so, you have reached the end of this journey, but the beginning of your own resurrection. The person listening to my voice right now is not the same one who clicked on this video. You came here carrying the ghost of who you were told to be, and you leave with the seed of who you truly are. This is the great secret of Carl Jung's work. The ultimate power is not found in another's arms, but in the unshakable embrace of your own soul. You have been handed the key. The choice to no longer be a shield for others, but a temple for yourself, is now yours to make. Your loyalty to yourself is the only compass you will ever need. Thank you for trusting me, and for walking this sacred path today. Your presence here is a testament to your courage. Now, we must ensure this fire you've ignited is never extinguished. This awakening is a powerful first step, but the world will test you. That is why our work here is not done. If you are ready to continue this transformation and build an unshakable foundation for your new self, then join our community of warriors. An incredible number of you who find strength in these messages are not yet subscribed. Take a second to click that subscribe button and turn on all notifications, because you will not want to miss the powerful truths we are set to uncover next. Press the like button as a physical act of sealing the promise you just made to yourself. And finally, for one last act of power, go to the comments below and declare your freedom with these 3 simple but life-altering words. I choose me. Let's flood the comments with this declaration and begin a revolution, right here, right now. I am honored to be on this path with you. Until next time, stay true.